going to start, if that's okay. In March 2013, the Northern Ballet, a dance company based in Leeds, premiered and then toured its production of Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, and they toured it throughout the UK. And this paper is going to discuss the adaptation from the literary source to a ballet, and it's basing on Linda Hutchins' 2006 work on adaptation that provides a theoretical, please come in, framework for considering how a nexus of literature, music and dance can be understood within the terms of each medium. A successful adaptation, says Hutchins, has a double nature. Quote, it's a work in its own right, and yet it has a relationship or an echo of the original. The issue becomes one of what to leave in, and that's the adapter's interpretation prior to recreation that informs the creation of a new work by distilling an essence of the original and yet transforming it to a new media. This paper will address what aspects of Nixon's reinterpretation of the literary text can be successfully viewed in his recreation to the dance text. Judith McCrell's a dance critic and broadcaster, and she wrote in 2004 in The Guardian that, quote, ballet deals with suggestion rather than exposition, and physical epiphany rather than analysis, and intuition rather than logic. So what does David Nixon, the artistic director of Northern Ballet, try to suggest through this ballet? In an interview with Mary Brennan, who's the dance critic of the Scottish Herald in 2013, Nixon says he focused on, quote, the scenes we never get to see from the book and the conversations we never get to hear. Early on, we just decided that Nick can't narrate this. He can reflect the energy of Gatsby, but he can't tell the story for Gatsby. That gave me, he says, a much greater freedom to structure the ballet, because I did want to know what happened between Tom's mistress Myrtle and her husband on the day that he tells her he knows she's been unfaithful. I want to go into that room, says Nixon, and confront her. Well, without a narrator, as Fitzgerald has in the book, to give us a point of view, without the language of words to tell us the story, to explain, to describe, to summarise, to expand, to travel through time and to different places, and to take the readers into the minds of the character, it's not surprising that Hutchins notes that the move from a novel, which is a telling medium, to a visual performance such as ballet, which is a showing medium, that is experienced in real time, even with the oral support of music, is, quote, usually seen as the most fraught transposition. Nevertheless, Nixon is renowned for his narrative ballets. A glimpse of excerpts just now from the ballet may help to give a sense of the shift from words to movement, and because time is limited, I'm going to talk over it. So if you'd just like to close your eyes and forget me and watch that, I won't mind. In this adaptation to a stage performance, there was what Hutchins calls a collaborative collaboration. There are, in fact, multiple makers involved. There's the choreographer, the artistic director, Nixon, the dancers, the performers, who have the responsibility to interpret the choreographer's intentions and to body the material and to give it existence. As dancer actors, these performers are required to understand the character, to breathe life into that persona on stage, whether moving or still. There is the composer, in this instance, Richard Rodney Bennett, whose music and songs were already in existence, and that's important because Nixon said that the creative planning time was brief, so the music was already there. Nevertheless, Bennett's music had the combination of classical rigour with jazz elements and cinematic scores that Nixon was looking for in his ballet. While not directly involved in creating a new score for ballet, Bennett did collaborate with Nixon in selecting music for each scene. The final part of this collaboration is the costume design, the set, the lighting, which helped to place the ballet in the same period as the novel and to give a suggestion of place. Both Hutchins, 2006, and Wolf, 2011, acknowledge how the medium makes a difference to what kind of content can be evoked and how they are presented to the reader viewer and how they're experienced. Stam, in 2000, writes that in the reformatting that occurs during an adaptation from one medium to another, there'll always be gains and losses. Certainly in Nixon's ballet, there are both gains and losses. The skill of the choreographer when making an adaptation is to be aware of both the audience who know the original and those who don't, by finding moments of intertextual echoing, by revisiting the original, but with variations, while providing what Hutchin calls the piquancy of surprise, will engage the knowing, while the unknown will visit the work as any new work. Ballet speaks through the language of the body, through the effort of the movement and the image in space and time. Nixon focuses on relationships in his ballet. The relationship of Gatsby with his dream for rekindling his bond with Daisy, of Tom and his mistress Myrtle. Nixon brings to the fore the relationship between George Wilson and his wife Myrtle. And here we see Myrtle and Tom in part of their, with her very much as the mistress. Nixon presents his audience with the grounded, low-level, animalistic, erotic duet of Tom and Myrtle. It's choreographed completely floor-based. It is about the highest level that they get to in their duet. And I think you can see that their lusty passion is quite clear and unequivocal. Contrastingly, in Act 2, the duet between George and his wife Myrtle, following his realisation of her infidelity, takes place in their bedroom. And it's lit as if for a southern sultry scene from Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. George lifts and drops his wife as easily as he manipulated a tire with which he danced earlier in the ballet. And with great gymnastic virtuosity between them, he constantly pulls her back to him as she constantly pulls away. Their suitcases are carefully placed downstage of them as a reminder of the trip they are to take together to escape from her lover, but they never do. In Act 1, we're presented with the light, joyful duet of Gatsby and Daisy after their meeting at Nick's. In contrast to Tom and Myrtle, it's full of demure glances, separated poses, with Gatsby with his hands in his pockets, of the two of them dancing and leaping in unison, while the music builds to a crescendo that is met with a high lift and the violins fade. Gatsby throws and catches Daisy, and she twirls into a still pose on point. Ever the ethereal, chaste ballerina character from the Ballet Blanc of the Romantic era of the 19th century. Yet tellingly, their reflections, as you can see here, in the window of the Gatsby mansion of the set are distorted, showing that their relationship between them is but an illusion, not a representation of the delight that their duet suggests. In Act 2, they come together at a party at Gatsby's. There is more carefully choreographed representation in their second duet. It's tender, it's yearning, but apart from a kiss, it continues to be chaste. And the continually highly elevated lifts, as we see here, shows just how much Gatsby has placed Daisy on a pedestal. She's still his unattainable dream. Interestingly, the married couple are the only duet to be portrayed in a bedroom at mid-level, lacking the animal passion seen in the floor sequence between Tom and Myrtle, or the transported innocent highs of Gatsby and Daisy. And perhaps it's symbolic of the staidness that has crept into their married relationship, perhaps part of the reason for Myrtle's fling with Tom. Nixon's approach to establishing these three relationships is a good example of how he achieves what McNally writes as one of the triumphs of the adapter, that is, seeking to, quote, reinvent the familiar and make it fresh. The identification and outlining of each of these characters for the viewer is made through the descriptive text of Nixon's choreography. In an interview, Nixon said he wanted to tell the behind-the-scenes stories. This solo of George with his tire in his workshop is certainly that. It's original and it paints a picture of an athletic working mechanic skillfully manipulating a tire with which he creates a fluid duet in Act 1. He is at one with his tire, sadly not so with his wife. Technical and supporting elements of the medium of ballet are important components in setting the scene and supporting the narrative. Use of mime acting along with the set, costume, lighting, and of course the music. The latter helps to create the fun and lively atmosphere of the jazz era and with its perky charlestons and sensual tangos, while the cinematic scores give the emotional scene to the drama of the scenes. For example, the use of the song I Never Went Away seems an apt choice for the final scene with Gatsby alone on the dock, reaching again to the green light and the distance after Daisy has returned to her husband and daughter. While fleetingly, young and old Daisy appear to perform a short trio with him just before he's left alone on the stage, and George runs on to shoot him, followed by a snap blackout. We in the auditorium join him in the silence of the blackness, provided a sudden and decisive ending to the ballet. Here we see examples of the simple minimal sets that, with our suspension of belief, allow us to see that we're either in Daisy's parlour, George's workshop, or at Gatsby's house. And always in the background at Gatsby's is the pier or the jetty that outlines the important place in the distance to which he's constantly reaching and yearning, and occasionally with a flashing, pulsing green light. Here we see more evidence of the set and the costume and how action and reaction of the narrative and the choreography. The athletic, dominating posturing of Tom, the cowering response of Daisy, the surprise of Nick Carraway, and the knowing position of Jordan that's more clearly shown here when she quietens Nick and uses mime to show that they're not to interrupt and ask more questions when Tom departs to answer the phone from his mistress. There is much which the knowing audience of the original will be familiar with in this ballet. Nick Carraway, who in the novel serves as the narrator, in the ballet serves as a solid male partner friend to Gatsby. He's often let to watch the action downstage, a pondering suggestion of a narrator having become an observer. But throughout he's poured into support, be it to provide links with the original narrative, such as taking Daisy at the beginning, or to form trios with Gatsby and Daisy, as seen here in a playful mood, just as in the novel. Though in the novel they don't chocker about. The reality of dance is that it's real movement in real time and in space. And to convey a sense of time that has passed, the technique of using a young Daisy and a young Gatsby to express a sense of the history of what has been before is used in Act 1 to show how Gatsby is bedazzled with the young girl in blue. We see the old Gatsby and the young Gatsby dancing with her, but she's always out of reach of the old Gatsby. The scene reappears throughout the ballet, always with Daisy as a centre of tension, but she's always out of his reach. A dream he's never able to catch and hold. She's carried away by other soldiers, or he by the shady men in black macks and fedoras, who strip him of his army uniform and put him in civilian clothes, hinting at ill-gotten gains. The use of the set as windows of Gatsby's mansion with views across the bay is also a valuable representational tool in the ballet. I've spoken already of how the distorted reflection of Gatsby and Daisy in the panes is symbolic of the relationship that is never to be a true reflection of their lives. But in Act 2 here, we see how the three reflections of the young past signals Gatsby's desire to recreate what's been lost. The young couples behind the set dance out of synchronization with the lead couple downstage of the set, a sign that what has been lost can't be recaptured. Perhaps the use of three couples in the background at this point is rather like being in a hall of mirrors, where one can see the reflection from all angles, yet they never become a reality, they merely stay an illusion. Finally, time passing is also suggested by the layering of a clock ticking or chiming over the music. For instance, after Gatsby's last duet with Nick, a clock chimes, Nick disappears, and those in the audience who are familiar with the original and Fitzgerald's time play know that time is indeed running out for Gatsby. Most dance critics agree that Act 2 is the weaker half of the ballet. The losses here is just literally that Nixon obviously ran out of time to be creative and to explore how he might distill the essence of that part of the novel. Nixon resorts to literal mime, of trying to show the story exactly how it's written, with mere moments of choreography, What was promising in Act 1 to be a glittering adaptation of the novel through the language of dance becomes a shallow representation through mimetic movements of Scott Fitzgerald's original structure. Hutcheon would more curtly explain it as slavish copying. So in parts, the attempt to adapt fails to succeed. Nevertheless, should Nixon have time and the funding to revisit this project, then there's much worthy of readapting. His idea to go behind the scenes and to look at what has not been said is one that you really should continue. Dance appeals to our kinesthetic senses. The encoded signifiers attract our intellect to make sense of. So what we, the audience, become the interpreter too, while the music helps us to stimulate our emotional response. We hear the emotive music in the same space that we share with the performers in the theatre. We vicariously experience their streams of energy from the stage, their interrelations, their rhythms with each other as they dance and act their relationships, and portray the narrative through the movement. Through this ballet adaptation, there are parts of the novel that we can see with new eyes. Thank you.